Greetings and hello, you're with Jono. Today we're doing a quick overview of the week's work, the market, possibly my messy office just for lols, and what I've seen pop up on the market. So we're starting again to do our property review on the Dunedin market and what's appearing and what you should be thinking about. General traits for houses. We don't go specific on what we'll see here, but we go through the new listings and we talk about them. This week we've had a raft of phone calls as diverse as somebody wants to take their builder to court because it hasn't worked very well. We've had phone calls from people hoping to buy houses for siblings. We've had phone calls from people wondering about the legality of replacing tiles without consents, of course. Then we've had phone calls from somebody chasing down, is there a septic tank or is there a mains connection? It's been a raft of these sorts of conversations. We've also talked about business a bit with some people, which is always fun. It just reminds me I've got a text message yet to send. And of course we've looked at half a dozen houses of all different varieties. So let me very quickly think about this week's houses. Where have we been? We've been to... I have to click and look myself because I'm terrible with addresses. But we have been to, this week, 15 Kenmure Road in Ballinose. That was a very interesting one. The report should be online, but I'm having some issues with an automation, as is my custom. So we'll get that online sooner or later. 65 Kennington Road in Murray Hill. We've also had a good look through. 51 Totara Street in Ravensbourne. Now, that was certainly interesting in that it had been moved there. They did some quite cool renovations. We've also had a look at 101 Doctors Point Road in Waitati, which, that will be possibly the most challenging, but potentially the most rewarding of the bunch I've looked at. Certainly the location's pretty damn cool. Went for a nice wee run on the beach afterwards and managed to have some birds dive by me because apparently it's nesting season. Who would have thunk? Good run nonetheless. Lovely day. Bit of rain on the beach, but it was hot, so it doesn't matter. What we'll do now is we'll quickly blow off over here and we'll have a wee look at what we have in TradeBees new listings and things you should be aware of. So, tall poppy here, Kenmure with Leona, 130 squares, 3. Yeah, it's actually getting pretty reasonably sized for a old brickie. It is a concrete roof, and you can see from the photographs here that you do have a bit of lichen on the roof. Now, the main thing with the concrete roofs is if over time they can start to get a little bit porous. So it's always, firstly, the best recommendation is kill any lichen, moss, mold that grows up there. 30 seconds, no more moss, mold, lichen, save yourself a bunch of money. The next one is actually going to be think about sealing your roof tiles. Whole bunch of ways of doing that, from silicons through to paints, through to high build paints, through. But if you keep them sealed, the tiles stay light and stay waterproof. Well, comparatively light as far as concrete can go. So then we look here at Mr. Berryman has one in St. Clair. It's going to be much the same with the roof. A simpler roof line means less to go wrong. There simply isn't the hips and valleys of the house above. But that's not to say it is good or bad. It is just to say simple equals less chances for things to go wrong. In Mosgiel here, standard things that we're going to see with houses like this. Look, it's modern. You can see it's got good drip edge protection and everything else around the edges. The challenge can often be one of the window area ratio. We tend to have a lot more windows in this sort of vintage of housing, the newer style. The challenge with that is whether they're actually warmer or not. With appropriate thermal drapes and everything else, they can be. But bear in mind there's a bifurcation between the passive house sort of standard, where a house stays reliably at that sort of 18 through 20 degrees with no additional energy input, and a modernist sort of architecture where a house can drastically rise and fall. Typically too hot is as much an issue as too cold. Anyway, down to Brighton, 4x2 surprises. I'm not sure what the 2 surprises are, but that's fine. What I see here is your classic batch that's been added to and added to and added to. So where the mouse is over here, you probably have the original portion. That's a little bit later. The gable there is reminiscent of the 60s, 70s. That may be 40s and 50s with a parapet front. And this is probably 70s as well, just a little bit later than this portion. So that's going to be an interesting one. That's not to say good nor bad. That's just to say interesting. I actually like interesting when people have come up with unique solutions to potential problems. Inner city home or accommodation, 5 bedrooms, 290 squares-ish. It's going to look pretty good from what we can see here, and I'm not looking in depth, but it looks like they've kept on top of their paintwork. Light and bright paint has the benefit of reflecting a lot of the UV, so it takes longer to break down. That said, do be aware that you've got materials like Resin Cool Colors and Dulux have an equivalent. These sorts of paints that, even though they can be darker, will still reflect the vast majority of UV and therefore keep the building cooler. So there are solutions that allow you to do something other than just whites and lights and greys. Darling Realty. Now, this one's a little bit interesting. Obviously a little bit of retaining around the place. That's one of the things we'd be wanting to look at is, do we have any cracking or anything like that movement? And with it sloping away at the front, is there any likelihood of scouring or slips in the worst case scenario? Again, just the usual stuff you see with age from what I can see in this photograph, different colours and different gable end from weatherboard from corners, which will be planking probably, but tidy. This sort of vintage is pretty simple really. You can get a few material things that we don't do so much anymore, but actually they're pretty wide open and easy to see, easy to work with, so I kind of like those. If we look down here in St. Clair, again painted at some point, we do have spouting there. It's, unless I'm misviewing this, it appears that we are quite low at the far end for the spouting. Normally you want it the other way around. There's a little bit of an interesting method of having a gable on there. Block wall is going to be pretty good because it will show us if we have significant ground movement or not, typically, depending on how thick they've built the foundation for that block wall. Cedar shingles up high, they actually last for a really long time. You either keep them oiled or you keep them painted, but eventually they will break down. It gets a bit tricky to replace because shingles are a huge amount bigger than you would think. And you've got to use copper nails, and you can have to strip back quite a long way. Unlike a weatherboard that only has one overlap, a shingle might well have 3 laps. So it can be a little bit complicated if you're repairing those. I can't see whether there's any to repair there or not. We're just talking about the materials. Green Island in Dunedin. Now this is quite cool from an access perspective because ramping means accessible generally, although I do see the little blocks down here. Now, I like the idea of accessible because I've had enough friends in wheelchairs that you start to notice the necessity for it. Obviously, somebody spent some money, and a really cool thing for me to see on this one is that all of the landscaping timber work that they've put in is stained. So that's going to preserve it for quite a long time. Can't tell exactly whether that's concrete tile or not. I mean, it fits the bill that it would be, but it could also be a pressed steel tile. Roof and stucco. Main things with stucco are always just keep the paint in good condition. Typically that means wash it once or twice a year, twice if you're down by the sea, once if you're not, twice if your windows get dirty on a really regular basis, once if they don't, because it's the dirt that will pin its way under the paint that will start to break it down. Now again, Mornington, single bedroom. I actually quite like renos on single bedrooms, and the reason for that is typically it's very cheap and easy because it's a small space. Typically they are built of mostly enduring materials. Sometimes these will be on a suspended floor, but typically there's good height when they are. If they're on concrete, that's even easier. Now, you may get condensation ventilation issues just by virtue of the small space, and the adjoined nature means you don't have the ability to get cross-plane ventilation as easily. However, they're normally pretty reliable, pretty easy to work with, pretty easy to heat, and hence, again, pretty easy to take one that might be a little bit tired, make it nice. Again, I don't know whether this one's tired or not. I haven't clicked through. We're just talking as we see it. Back in vogue, Kinmont Park. Now, Kinmont Park, I think, is one of those areas that has really good potential and will come back again. And Pam and Abby have been busy this week. Me oh my. oftentimes with this concrete sort of gable end that you see up here, or gravel looking, it will be embedded on top of an asbestos panelling. So you've got to be a little bit cautious of that. The era fits the use of fibrous cement, and most of the fibre cement from that era would be an asbestos containing material. It may or it may not, but ultimately it's one thing to be aware of with the era. The other thing with this one is in terms of just weather tightness risk, not talking about whether it's leaky or not, but in terms of the risk, no eaves to speak of, increases the risk slightly. Now, reasonably good parapet flashing detail that we can see there, but without paying attention in the flesh, you do just want to check that if it's exposed particularly to heavy winds, which down there maybe probably not, that could conceivably increase the risk of a bit of water making its way back in. But again, maintenance is 90% of the battle. We have the old classic town and country cottage house. I actually personally quite like this design. It's just really cool. For whatever reason, you do lose a little bit of headspace in your upstairs, and oftentimes the flashing detail between the roof and the lower roof can be challenging to manage because it's just such a massive change. So you can get a little bit of water or pine needles, for example, building up down here. Again, if you keep them clean, every so often you poke your nose up there and you give it a wash and a sweep if needs be, or leaf blower. Generally speaking, these will work quite well because the primary roof has really good water escape velocity. The next part to note is board and batten construction. Personally, I quite like either oiling, preferably oiling rather than painting. But a lot of people go for the silvered look. And to be honest, the durability difference is relatively slim. Once it's silvered, it will stay that way for an awful long time. But oftentimes when the timber is new or new repairs have been done, the newer timber will twist and warp a bit more than oiled or silvered timber. So it's one thing to watch out for. Pretty simple construction, easy enough to work on. The only challenge can be the height up to the back windows and things like that. Okay, Maori Hill in Dunedin. What do you tend to find with these ones here? Obviously it's a full brick structure, so you say brick plus stucco, but the stucco up top is actually just over brick anyway. These, again, generally pretty reliable. Things that you're kind of going to expect is a little bit of surface cracking on the corners from the garage. Sometimes you're going to expect a little bit of ground moisture in the base, and that's because it's built into a hill. That's why you've got a drive-in garage. You're probably not going to have internal access to said garage, but, you know, it's good for storage and or workshop. Roofing, it appears like you might have a line there which says that you're still on an original roof. And to be honest, in most suburbs, as long as the paint's kept in good order, that's fine. What is always a good suggestion if you've got an older roof is to whip out the lead head nails and replace them with Tek screws. What that's going to do is hold it down a darn sight better than a nail will, but also you get an electronegativity action between lead head nails and galvanized iron, and that will cause some rust where the nail head goes through. So removing that prevents further rusting. You can, if they are rusted particularly, you can treat them with a bit of kill rust and then repaint before you stick your Tek screws in. Spot paint is common. But again, how long can a roof last? And the answer to that question, I've seen plenty of roofs that are actually 120 years old. A lot of it actually comes back to how it deals with water, because if you get water off a different roof plane, that may well have an ionic charge, which may promote rust. It also matters how it's dealt with earthing for the same reason. And again, how well maintained, how much pollution there is, how many trees around the place. If there's trees and they're dropping pollen and pine tar and all that sort of stuff, you can break down a bit faster. Whereas if it's clean and clear and nothing ever sits on the roof, it's probably going to last for a really long time. Next level design for future living. Wow, that's huge. Big glass areas, cool architectural detailing and everything else. Honestly, there's not a huge amount that you do tend to find with these. It's often the little details that are very easy to forget if you buy a newer home. And those details are things like silicon. Silicon has a 5-year wear span. It will break down. So every so often, you've actually got to wander around your own house and go, you know, how are the flanges on the taps? How's the silicon on the shower, basins, etc., etc.? How's the flooring looking? Lubricate any of the big roller doors. Lubricate your window hardware. tighten the handles. These are the things that tend to change a bit. What else? Kitchen hardware, actually. When a new kitchen's put in, everything's nice and flush. When it's used for a bit, you'll get a bit of adjustment. So normally after about 6 months or so, you want to go back and just give it some tweaks. Make sure that all the hinges are tight. Make sure that the cupboards are plumb level and everything's square. And then we come to possibly, well, certainly the most outstanding of the listing that has popped through for me today. I have actually clicked through this one, but I won't do it here. But what you've got, round roofs, you've got steel, you've got cedar. This is, an architect has really put some thought into this. The main things are really just going to come down to what is the lifespan of the materials. So when you're dealing with a steel cladding, depending on what they've used, if it's typically ZR8, 15 years is what the building code specifies. It will achieve that and a little bit more. If you wash it regularly, you can more than double its lifespan. If it's in a salt environment and you've just used ZR8, you're not going to get 50 years out of it. That much is for sure. But in a bush environment, there's no reason you shouldn't, as long as you keep the bush, trees, plants, shrubs at least 30 centimetres away from the house, preferably more than a metre. That allows good airflow, it allows everything to dry, it allows you to see if it starts getting algae or lichen on it, so you can treat it. Now, again, very cool with the curved roof and everything else, and that does simplify it because you don't have an apex now which can leak, but it does mean it's a little bit more challenging if you do need to do repairs later on. That said, that's a quick overview of all the houses that Trade Me has sent me through today. Well, actually not today. No, it is today, 2 hours ago. Look at that. Comments, is there any there that particularly stand out? Look, there is a few. There's some pretty cool houses. It's a pretty cool market. I never talk about the value, simply because it's not mine to talk about. But, you know, as a human being, there's none of these houses that I'd look at that I'd go, nah, don't touch that with a barge pole. Each and every one of them has, merit. We can tell you the pros and cons about the specifics. Go to Prosperbuild. I might well have done it or be doing it. And give us a ring if you want to know anything about the house. Sweet. I am about to shoot off for a coffee with the boys, so have yourself a wonderful day. Coffee for the boys, and then I'm going to go look at a rather large property out in Green Island in the boony parts. Large property, I think it's 2 dwellings effectively. A lot of land, good views of the sea, and that will appear on my website early next week. So good luck with a weekend's house hunting. Good luck with doing up your house as you need it. If you need to set some strategy around what sort of house you should be looking at, if you want to run your shortlist past someone that knows housing and can be a bit brutal and a bit blunt if needs be, give us a ring. I am going to charge you for that one, but I promise you it'll be worth the cost. Anyway, Jono signing out and off to coffee.